Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Well, having worked with Microsoft and LinkedIn, sales consultant Mark McDermott is acutely aware of the international growth opportunities which Europe can provide. Knowing that Ireland is the gateway to Europe for many US headquartered entities, Mark is promoting Ireland as a location for American companies. Mark joins us now to tell us more. Mark, as I mentioned, you help US companies to grow in Europe, but how exactly do you achieve this?
Good morning, Carl. Good morning to your listeners. I'm looking forward to the conversation this morning. My background is in sales, and throughout my career, I've helped those companies that you've mentioned identify clients, build trust with them, and ultimately generate revenue for those companies. Nowadays, in my consulting business, I help US companies do just that by expanding revenues into Europe, and ideally do that via Ireland. And I do that in a number of different ways. But ultimately, it's about building a go-to-market strategy. It's about leadership excellence. It's about hiring great people and doing whatever it takes to leverage my network and leverage my skills and knowledge to help them succeed.
And you've created a particular niche focusing on US businesses that want to enter the European market. Why so?
It's in the news a lot these days. It's been an incredible relationship between Ireland and the US going back since before the start of the Irish state. And it's been a great place for Irish companies to succeed. And so, although there's a lot of turmoil in that space at the moment, the US still is a great place for Irish companies to expand their business, but also for US companies to expand into Europe via Ireland. And there's a number of reasons why. During my time at LinkedIn in particular, I noticed how they were looking to the European market to grow the business typically by 30%. So 30% of revenues for these big companies comes from Europe. And so that's a huge market for these US companies. And so for me, it's about, all right, how do I leverage this knowledge and this experience of sales, strategic relationships, go-to-market strategy, and bring that to smaller US companies so not just the big companies can succeed in this market.
One of the things that you do as part of this is you promote Ireland as a European base for these US companies that are looking to access the European market. So how do you sell Ireland in that respect?
Yes, well, the market itself is very attractive because it's a single market. There's 27 countries. There's 18 trillion in GDP across all of these countries. And so the first question you have to ask yourself is, well, how do we enter this market and where's the best place to base ourselves from? One of the big challenges that I see from these US companies is that they think it's like the United States of America, that it's going to be the United States of Europe. And as you and I'm sure your listeners know, these 27 countries have different everything, but I would say culturally, there's huge differences. And so it's important that you choose a country and a location that can easily integrate very well into these countries. And Ireland, as the only English-speaking country in the EU with a very business-friendly environment, and I would say, we've heard a lot about, tax and so on, but Ireland has incredible soft skills, Carl. And I think we don't tell this story enough. We are very hardworking. We're very committed. We're problem solvers. We're innovators. We can flex. We can adjust. We're entrepreneurial. We're trustworthy. We can build rapport. And I think ultimately that's about great leadership. It's great emotional intelligence. And I think this is the one area that I think we should continue to invest in because it is one of our strengths. And now that, tax has been harmonized, we need to really understand what our strengths are and leverage them even more.
And with so much uncertainty politically in the US right now, and of course the talk of tariffs, what's the appetite like in 2025 from US companies to start exploring opportunities in Europe?
At this moment, if you had a modern keyboard nowadays, we probably have a giant button in the middle of it that says pause, right? And that pause button is, let's wait and see. There's this first 100 days of this latest presidency, there is so much turmoil. And I think it's in some ways that's been part of the plan. is this uncertainty and turmoil in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And so if you're a US company, you're looking to make those expansion plans, you're looking at headcount growth in Ireland or wherever, you're going to hit that big button, the easy button, which is the pause button. And there's other reasons for that too, Carl, right? So it's not just the political uncertainty. AI is playing a huge role in this uncertainty. The billions upon millions that the Microsofts, Amazons and Googles and IBMs have invested in their AI infrastructure, they're going to look for payback. And what payback means is smaller companies will invest in AI. They will start to benefit from cost savings of and efficiencies from deploying AI. And that's where headcount always gets looked at too. And I could see this at play with some of these companies, even things like forecasting. My background is sales, as you know. One of the hardest parts of sales is forecasting. AI is doing most of that now because there's so many data points out there. When you look at digital selling, you can look at volumes of emails, analyzing sentiment within emails and social media. AI is actually a much better predictor of sales than human beings.
You developed and sharpened your skill set within the US multinational sector. So I'd like to know, how did you then translate that into your own business in the sales strategy piece? So how do you now go out and identify clients and acquire them?
Yes, well, one of the products that I sold during my time at LinkedIn was our LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And LinkedIn is an incredible tool for identifying an ideal client profile. So rather than waste your time, sending out lots of emails or in-mails or tweets or whatever it might be, there's a modern way to sell. And that's making sure you get to the right customer much more quickly, and that when you do, you're much more educated on what it is that they're going to need from you. So it's not just about LinkedIn. Now, there's really amazing tools. There's one that I use now called Crystal Nose, N-O-S-E. And you can use that tool, upload the LinkedIn profile of a target client, and it will give you a psychological breakdown of that individual and how they like to be approached.
Wow.
And how they like to speak to. Right? Unbelievable. Okay? And you know what, Carl? It works. It works.
Better again.
Better again. The second part of LinkedIn is, again, it's a little known tool that most people don't know about. If you're a CEO or a leader, and if you're looking to expand into Europe, you don't have a network, you don't know who your target clients are, and you've no visibility. And your staff want to know what's going on as well. When you use LinkedIn effectively, and I advise and consult with CEOs on this, it helps with your hiring strategy, your marketing strategy, your sales strategy, and your communications. It's like a nutrient that feeds every aspect of your business. And so you want to play it smart when you're expanding into Europe, and you want to do it quickly, and you don't want to spend ridiculous amounts of money with large consulting firms. There are modern ways to get up and running really quickly, leveraging the network of people you're working with, and use authentic communications. When you use it properly on LinkedIn, you can get your brand and your visibility out there.
So once you identify your ideal target market and have been profiled on LinkedIn, talk us through your own sales process for Nuapoint on LinkedIn to acquire clients.
Yeah, so my business now is, let's say, it's not high churn, right? So for me, I might have one or two clients at any one given time. It might last a year, sometimes less, and sometimes more. And so for me, it's about getting the exact right fit. And the way I've done that, Carl, is to make sure that my LinkedIn content is a great reflection of who I am as a person and what's important to me and what I can do, of course. But all my businesses typically come from referrals. So I very rarely send a cold in-mail or a cold email. It will always be through a referral. And LinkedIn is obviously, a great tool for showing you if you find an ideal client, do you know somebody in common? How well do you know that person? So a very common in-mail that I send would be, hey, Carl, I notice you're connected to John. How well do you know John? And then you come back to me and say, and often you get this, of course, as well. Like, well, actually, I don't know John that well. But then another time you'll say, yes, I know John quite well. What do you think and how can I help? And that's how business gets done.
And what about if, for instance, you don't have any connections in common and you do have to use that colder approach?
Another classic example where AI is changing the game of professional sellers. So I mentioned the tool there, Crystal Knows, where you can upload their profile and give you a psychological breakdown because it analyzes their content and so on. But ultimately, what the best sellers do is they understand what's important to that person, what's important to their business. Ideally, if they're publicly listed, what I'll do is I'll look at their annual report. I will upload that into one of the AI channels, ChatGPT, Grok, whatever your fancy is. And it will tell me, I'll ask it very directly, what are the challenges in that business? And that, prior to AI, would have taken me days. And honestly, me as a builder, that's my leadership style, that work was pretty difficult for me to do. It's not my favorite piece of work to do, but I'm very aware of the importance of it. And so making sure you're laser focused on the business outcomes of your clients. And this doesn't just go for me and my consulting business. I'd say this to any seller who's listening to this in your audience. Always think about what is the business outcome that my client wants to achieve. And that's helped me be super successful earlier in my career when I was selling.
When it comes to hiring great salespeople, is your approach to advise clients to recruit seasoned sales professionals or to build within?
Probably both. Okay, because seasoned sales professionals are hard to come by, hard to hire, cost a lot of money, and there's risk, right? So what you want, if you're looking for instant impact, but you got to, get this whole notion of think fast, think slow. So if you're thinking fast, you're going to have to hire some seasoned sales professionals to tap into their network, similar to what I do, and use their deep skill set as to build trust quickly and get to revenue more quickly. And at the same time, what the best companies do is they hire younger sales professionals and coach and train them, not just on the company culture and how we do things here, but making sure that they continue to get an outside perspective and outside coaching. So those entry-level sales folks are really, really important for longevity in the business to make sure that you're successful for the long term.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was sales consultant Mark McDermott from Nuapoint, and I'd like to thank Mark for joining us on this morning's show.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.